Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Belal Muhammad versus Gabriel Bonfim fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get, oh, and also feel free to join the Patreon. You can use the Patreon to request any kind of combat sporting related content, and I appreciate all the support in which I've had with it so far, and of course the link will be in the description. Now let's get straight into this one, and I think this is going to be a good fight, but a true showing if the former welterweight champion curse is actually a thing or not, because we've been seeing it for a while now. Obviously, all the way since Tyron Woodley was champion, he went on to lose multiple times after losing to Kamaru Usman, who, when he lost the belt, went on to lose 3 times. With Leon Edwards, he's gone on to lose twice since losing the belt, and Muhammad has lost once so far. JDM has lost once so far. It does seem like it is a bit of a pattern, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how this fight goes, because realistically a number 11 spot fighter on the come up shouldn't be able to beat a former world champion who has only lost once since being the champion, against a guy who most likely will be getting a title shot next in Ian Garry. So again, obviously MMA math never really adds up, but it does seem to be a bit of a pattern going on at the moment, and so it will definitely be interesting to see if this fight ends up kind of leaning more towards that pattern, and if that is actually a thing, because yeah, it's not looking good so far, and Muhammad did look a step off of it in his fight against Ian Garry, just like he did in his fight to lose the belt against JDM, and obviously we've seen JDM lose to Prates after losing to Makachev as well. So again, it's just a very interesting curse, which could actually be a thing, which again, I feel like this is a real showing of it, because Muhammad definitely has a real good chance to win this one. You would say when JDM lost to Prates was already a top contender, whereas Muhammad lost to Ian Garry, who was a top contender, but then stepping down to Bonfim, who we don't know as much about, and you would argue isn't as strong or as scary of a contender as that of Prates, who also beat Leon Edwards as well. So again, you would definitely say, out of the options available to not have this welterweight curse continue, this fight would be one of them. No real discredit though to losing to Ian Garry. Like I say, he is a top name and should be getting a title shot next. And it was a tough fight for Muhammad to have, because Ian Garry is just such a well-rounded fighter. But I think he really could trickle down the rankings if obviously he loses this fight, and I'm not sure if he has got the same kind of resurgence in him that we are kind of getting from Kamaru Usman. Obviously Usman was a much better, much longer reigning champion than Belal Muhammad at welterweight, but we've seen Usman come back to be able to win off of coming off 3 losses, whereas I just don't know if Muhammad loses this one, if he has got it in him to be able to then, like I say, create a bit more of a resurgence, whereas, we're not seeing that type of resurgence from somebody like Leon Edwards at the moment, who is obviously at the pinnacle of the sport after he beat Usman. So it's a tough thing to ask for any fighter, but he could be, on the slide to an extent. And to be fair, the more you look at Muhammad's resume, you would probably say that with the way that the fights have aged, the fighters have aged, and past opponents of Muhammad, you would say his Sean Brady win is probably actually the best win of his career. Obviously, in the moment, it wasn't anywhere near as big as the Leon Edwards win for him, but with Brady, first of all, he was able to stop Brady, and that was impressive. Obviously, Morales was able to stop Brady, but still, Brady beat Edwards. Brady is also coming off a win now as well against Buckley, so, where he completely nullified Buckley. So I feel like the level of Brady is actually been shown to be better than that of Leon Edwards, as Leon Edwards has found himself fighting more guys in the division. Obviously, Edwards dethroned Usman, which was a massive moment, but then Edwards beat Covington, which wasn't really a good title defense. and there's no real credit to that in my opinion. And then since then, like I say, has just been on a losing streak. So there's definitely an argument there, especially at this point in time. You would definitely say Brady's in a much better position than that of Edwards. So again, you would see and look at it at the moment. And say that is probably the best win. Like I say, him stopping Brady as well does help to bolster the fact that you would say that that is his best win of his UFC career so far. But I mean, also, I mean, he's got other good names. Belal Muhammad. He also has a name in which both of these guys share in opponents in Stephen Thompson, who Muhammad did beat better and clearer than that of Bonfim, and actually beat him earlier than that of Bonfim as well, which is another interesting dynamic for this fight. Bonfim has been on a good run post his early KO loss in the UFC in 2023 when he'd only had one or two fights in the UFC prior to that. He's got, like I say, a good win streak going. I think he's on 4 or 5 wins now, and he's gotten a win against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, which is definitely the most noticeable name of his career. But that was a close fight on the back end of Thompson's career, and I'm pretty sure Thompson has retired since then. And to be fair, Thompson caught him with a shot in the end of the second round, which was actually a big shot and looked like it could have then led to Bonfim being knocked out. He showed heart to not get stopped in that, but again, it was definitely a shot that showed some punch vulnerabilities, and of course, we've seen Bonfim get knocked out as well. Again, vulnerabilities there as well. But then last time out, Bonfim managed to get an exciting KO win against Randy Brown, which definitely built up more hype for him as a prospect. With him, having the close fight against Stephen Thompson, I don't feel like many people were that hyped with him coming into the rankings. So for him to get the win against Brown, that was again, like I say, a bit of an early stoppage. You would probably argue with the knee coming in and Brown getting dropped, and then Brown did look like he was in a position to still be able to defend himself, even though he was on the ground. It was a big, drop for him to get knocked down, but I still feel like Bonfim could have gone and tried to land a few more before the ref jumped in to really kind of solidify that type of win. But nonetheless, obviously, it was still a good knockout win, and like I say, got a bit more hype behind him. But again, you look at the names around in the UFC with prospects, and you've got some really exciting names. Of course, we've got Madic, we've got Amosov, who's a real exciting name coming through as well with welterweight in the welterweight division. When you've got both of them kind of guys around, you aren't really looking at Bonfim just yet, in my opinion, unless he gets a big win in this fight. At the moment, like I said, I still don't think he's quite one of the more hyped up names in the welterweight division as a prospect. And there is also a big age gap between the two of them in this fight, with, I'm pretty sure, I haven't got the numbers down, Bonfim being 26 and Muhammad being 37. If I'm right, of course, that's an 11-year age gap. That is definitely going to play a factor, and you can see the youthfulness more in Bonfim's style compared to Muhammad's. To speak about both fighters skill-wise individually, though, we'll start off with Belal Muhammad, and he has the on-rushing kind of striking attacks followed by takedown attempts. When he does that at his best, it's nice. The on-rushing attacks can sometimes be difficult to deal with and can cause a bit of disruption. Again, it seemed to really pin up against the cage Leon Edwards, but then Garry was able to nullify it quite well, and so was JDM. He's not afraid to commit to his attacks, Muhammad, which obviously is good as well. He can get his hands together for a double leg. Or just for a takedown in general, which again against Edwards was really nice, the way that he was just continually able to get his hands around and connect them to then get the takedowns. The one that he dropped Leon Edwards on his head with, which was a really nice takedown, the kind of getting the hands under the torso in between the legs, was again really nice to be able to go out and get the takedown. And I feel like he gets them takedowns a bit differently to that of Bonfim, and he can also get a takedown from quite a deep position as well, again getting his hands connected, forcing you to the ground. Obviously, it's not always the best to go for deep takedown attempts, because if you miss it, you're in a real bad position. You can then be more likely put on your back. But again, Muhammad is actually pretty good at it. So again, I feel like both of these guys are willing to go for takedowns, but I think the style and the technique that both of these guys are best at are different. He's got good level changes as well, Muhammad. He sets quite a high tempo on the feet, which will be interesting. I don't feel like Bonfim is, he can fight at a high tempo on the feet. For as long as the Brown fight lasted, that was at a pretty high tempo, but it can make him look quite uncomfortable, which Muhammad might be able to exploit. He puts on the pressure. He also, I don't think, is allowing you to set yourself at a distance. Against Ian Garry, even though he lost, he was still not allowing Garry to have too much time at a distance to really just pot shot on him. Again, like I mentioned, he was keeping on that pressure a bit more, which was nice and which was necessary, and you could tell which, it was part of a game plan for Muhammad in that fight. Negatives about Muhammad, I think he struggles to fight from a distance as well, which is another reason why he has to put on that pressure, because he's just not rangy enough as a fighter to be able to deal with distance that well. Whereas I think Bonfim actually does prefer to fight at a distance. The effect of his takedowns don't seem to be having the same kind of level of effect anymore, and getting a single leg takedown, which he kept trying to go for in the Ian Garry fight, just made him look, not very good. It was quite easy for Ian Garry to just shrug them off continuously, and he wasn't able to get the trips in. If you're going for the single leg takedowns and it's not working, you kind of have to then drag your opponent more towards the center and try and circle them back to the center, or try and take them off to a side, or try and go for a trip. And he wasn't really doing that at all. Again, like I mentioned, against Ian Garry or against JDM, to be able to actually get the takedowns and to have that same level of success with the takedowns like he did against Edwards. He can have a lack of control when he is attacking. Like I say, the onrushing attacks always come with an element of danger. He's not always as clean with his work, especially on the feet. His legs can be beaten up, and I think the kind of stomp teep kicks in which Ian Garry was throwing really did seem to have an effect on Belal Muhammad. I don't think he deals with bigger fighters all that well. Obviously, he has to punch you up and work harder to be able to get in close. His head movement is pretty non-existent, to be fair. I think he can struggle against straight shots, and I really want to see Bonfim use them straight shots more in this fight. And in general, I don't think he's much of a submission threat. Even if he is getting in good positions on the ground, he's not that much of a submission threat. And I actually would say Bonfim is probably more of a submission threat coming into this fight. Obviously, we're getting used to decision fights with Belal Muhammad. We're more than used to that now. Bonfim, as a fighter, he's light on his feet with decent lateral movement. So if he is being light on his feet and defensively moving around, he might be able to bait Belal Muhammad with the onrushing attacks quite well. He chops away at the leg. Again, we saw him do that against Brown for as long as the fight lasted. Really did chop away at the legs quite strongly, and tried to do it against Thompson. But when you're kind of kicking with Thompson, it's always going to be difficult to be able to come out on top in that way. He's got fast strikes, pretty fast hands. He's tighter with his hooks, you would probably say, than that of Muhammad, but he definitely was tighter with his hooks than that of Brown. He's got strong inside knees, and if he is using that against Muhammad, that's definitely a weapon in which he could have success with. Obviously, that was what knocked out Randy Brown, and it probably was the most powerful of weapons in which I've seen from him on the feet. And again, that was nice, and he could definitely catch Muhammad, like I say, with these onrushing attacks. If he baits him with his movement, that could be a real weapon, and we could even possibly see Muhammad actually get properly hurt at a high level for, arguably one of the first times. We've seen him get his face beaten up, but we haven't actually seen him actually get stunned completely by a shot, I don't believe. So again, if Bonfim times that need on the inside, he definitely could do that. I would say he's best striking at mid-range at a bit of a slower tempo, which, again, Garry had moments where he was able to have that bit slower tempo at a mid-range, but only for short amounts of time. So again, he'll probably want that to go on for a bit longer, which again will be necessary to chop away at the leg, because I don't feel like Muhammad takes legs kicks that well. Like I mentioned, they can be beaten up his legs. And then be able to slow him down from there. He progresses to your back to gain takedowns, which is actually a bit of a unique thing that he does, or not unique, but a bit of a different thing that he does. Against Thompson, he was getting to the position where he had Thompson pinned up against the cage, and he was in a bit of a takedown type position, but then he would progress to his back before then going for a takedown. I feel like we've seen it with Aljamain Sterling a bit, and again, it's a bit of a creative way to go for a takedown, and that was again unique and nice, and it was different. Obviously, the takedown defense of Stephen Thompson we've never really been seen or been saying it's anything too crazy, so I feel like it would be harder to get somebody like Muhammad down. But again, it was him going for that, and I would like to see him using that well-rounded style of his to be able to still, be willing to go to the ground, even though we know that Muhammad is comfortable on the ground, still willing to try it in this fight. And like I mentioned, I think he is more of a submission threat. Negatives about him, he stands very tall and his chin is pretty exposed, especially when he's throwing, and he can be off balance in close when he's throwing, and he can square up in exchanges and can look messy. So again, if he is allowing Muhammad to get in close, then he can look quite messy and it might not be the best for him. And then he could definitely get caught with punches. His chin gets pretty exposed. Like I mentioned, he has quite an open guard. He doesn't use his rangy punches enough. If he uses them well, he could really have success with them, but I feel like he's just not using them enough. He's not as assertive in getting takedowns. I think when Muhammad was getting the takedowns on Edwards, he was very assertive and really using their strength and, like I say, ragdolling Edwards, whereas we haven't really seen that kind of same level of assertiveness going for the takedowns from Bonfim so far. He can put himself in bad spots on the ground, probably more so than that of Muhammad. He goes for takedowns often when you're already up against the cage, which does make it harder, which means that, I mean, I suppose it means for your opponent that they're not able to then just go back towards the cage to then lean on it, and, like I say, lose that space if you are fighting in the middle, if that makes sense. But it means the opponent is already up against the cage, which is going to make it harder for you getting a takedown anyway. It means you have to adjust your position to then go for a takedown, which, like I mentioned, he can do, but it can possibly become a bit predictable if he is doing that over and over again. And in general, like I said, I feel like he can struggle at times to keep you on the ground against Thompson. I think there was moments where he was struggling to keep him on the ground, but he was keeping Thompson pinned up against the cage, which was necessary in the final round for him to be able to win the fight. If the ref would have broken it up, it might have been a different story of who won the fight, but it was definitely necessary, especially when he'd been buzzed in the second round, him just pinning Thompson up against the cage. And again, obviously that's what led on for him to get the victory, and of course you got to win any means necessary. So, who do I think is going to win this fight? I feel like Gabriel Bonfim is going to win this fight via unanimous decision. Do I feel like Bonfim is the next exciting prospect at welterweight? No. But do I think he's more well-rounded than that of Muhammad? Yes. And do I feel like he has better weapons to be able to have success? Yes. I think Bonfim is the rangier fighter. If he uses his range and can slow down Muhammad with the kicks, then he can have success in that way. On the ground, he's, like I say, more of a submission threat, and he goes for a different type of takedown, which could work on Muhammad a bit as well. Again, we haven't seen Muhammad be too much on his back or in bad positions on the ground, like I say, in a negative way. He might be able to nullify Belal Muhammad's attacks. Belal Muhammad isn't as powerful, so I feel like the threat of the power punches to really damage Bonfim isn't there as much. And again, like I say, he can even catch Muhammad coming in with the knee as well. Again, I feel like there is just more weapons actually in the arsenal of Bonfim to be able to have more success. Muhammad might be able to show a level of above with getting in close and getting the strikes going and then going for the takedown. It's just if he can keep him there, then he can obviously have more success. But I think Bonfim is, like I say, a bit more of a well-rounded fighter, which is going to lead more towards his favour. Again, like I say, I don't think he is going to be able to beat some of the top guys in the division at the moment, but if he comes with a real good performance, he might shut me up. Who I would like to see him fight next if he wins this one. Obviously, this would be by far the biggest win of his career so far. So to go on to fight next, he could go on to fight another former champion in JDM. That could be interesting. A bit more of a different type of striking matchup with JDM obviously coming off quite a bad loss. That could be, like I mentioned, interesting as well. Sean Brady obviously could be a fight. Obviously, Brady's coming off the win against Buckley, but everybody else really higher up the rankings won't really be wanting to fight Brady, so he might have to fight below him again, which could be obviously Gabriel Bonfim. That could be made into a good fight, or Amosov, like I mentioned, Ukrainian fighter coming through 2-0, two submissions so far in the UFC. Really exciting guy coming through. Has a lot of hype behind him. From the Ukrainian fans, so that could be again Bonfim will be fighting below him, but obviously, like I mentioned, it will be difficult for him to get the matchups higher up above him, other than JDM or possibly Brady. So if either of them guys don't want to fight, then the Amosov fight would be a great fight, I think, and could be a real good battle of contender upon contender to see who is, like I mentioned, one of the best contenders in the welterweight division, which is, like I've of course mentioned, a real stacked division at the moment. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you didn't like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.